these guys, the hands out kind of guy. Anyway, I grew up in large national and international ad agencies for about 18 years, and then in 1994, I started a company called Soho Marketing. So, you know, the companies that we're going to talk about tonight, the business owners, the boomer age business owners, or babos as I like to call them, they were my clients, and they were probably in their 40s, 30s, 40s, 50 years old. A few years ago, I transitioned my marketing services company to a company called Warren Business Development Center, or Warren BDC. And basically what Warren BDC does is it works primarily but not exclusively with boomer age business owners to help them increase the value of the company prior to selling. Hence the book about getting 3 times as much for your business, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. What we do want to talk about tonight is what's going on inside the head of the owners. And just before we get into that, who wants to volunteer? Just quickly, are you working for a business owner? Do you have clients who are business owners? Do you have your own business? Who's out there? Who'd like to just quickly volunteer? Okay, thank you. Tony? You work for?
Yeah,
Okay.
for private.
How old is the company?
Around 40 years, and the owner is 60.
Okay, so he's prime for what we're talking about. Anyone else? Yes, thank you.
I work for a company.
Mm-hmm.
Company's 200 years old.
Wow.
It's a public company.
Okay.
But, I work with, a lot of my clients are clients who are owners of business.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so this is a pretty important topic for what you're going to do. Okay, great. And that's really who's in the audience right now. Is we have a selection of owners, people who work for owners, and people who have owners as clients. So I think Larry alluded to the fact that we're not necessarily doing a PowerPoint kind of a presentation. I'm not a PowerPoint kind of a guy, but I would like to try something a little bit different this evening. So, what we have on this magic piece of paper is about a dozen questions that will flow the conversation for this evening. And what I'd like to do is just hand it out and pass it around. So whoever wants to ask the first question, please just ask the question. I'll respond to it, cross it out, and whoever else wants to ask the next question, then grab a sheet of paper and ask the question. How's that? Is that okay? Who wants to ask the first question? And whoever wants to ask the first question will get a free copy of my book.
Okay. So Eric, can you tell me why we're here tonight?
Okay. Wow, that's a really good question, Jennifer. Thank you. I have to tell you that I originally wrote out these questions, and I originally had what I thought were very humorous beginnings to a question like, Eric, you're a snappy dresser, tell us about X. And then I decided at the last minute, well, I'll take out all the humor. I'm not sure everybody's going to get my sense of humor. So why are we here? We're here because this thing called boomer age business owners and this whole process that's happening in the business community of companies transitioning is a massive opportunity for everyone in this room. If you have an idea of how to make a business owner's life a little bit better, if not a lot better, when they get to this stage in their lives, you're likely going to put yourself in a higher position, whether it's with a boss or a client or your spouse or someone else who's running a business. What we're dealing with is a large number of owners who are likely about to make the most important sale of their lives, and they are the least prepared to do it. It's hard to believe, but I see people nodding their heads. These folks spend 25, 35, 45 years creating this wonderful entity called their company, their business, and the last thing that they thought about over the last number of decades was what the heck they were going to do. So, you find yourselves in meetings with folks where there's two partners who started a business literally 47 years ago. They're 74 and 75 years old. And you can see it in their eyes, you can see it in the conversation. they've realized that unfortunately they're beginning to run out of runway, and they're beginning to realize quickly that they probably should have done something a long time ago. And so we see that all the time. The other side of that coin is interesting, is that some younger folks who may be in their 40s or 50s, and obviously people in their 40s are not boomers, those folks are calling us and saying, you know what, we keep hearing about this whole transition and succession and whatnot. We'd like to get on the right side of it. So if you in fact have companies that you're dealing with, you have clients, you have bosses, whatever, who are younger, these are folks that are looking at a 15-year window. And they're saying to themselves, if I get going now in preparing the business for sale, and I do it properly over the next 15 years, I'm going to be in incredible shape by the time that comes around. So it becomes an interesting conversation that goes well beyond, you know, what you might think is just the kind of the boomer owner, but it's actually impacts a whole lot of other business. And we'll get into some more stories later on and some more examples of specifics. Next question. Who wants to answer? Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Tempted to read it like a grade 2 play, but I'll
Go for it.
Can you give us some stats on Can you give us some stats on what is happening in the transition marketplace?
Another great question. It's amazing how this happens over and over again. I know. It's like we're in sync.
You don't want to.
No, it's crazy up there or whatever. 65% of established businesses in this country are owned by boomer age owners. Okay, 65%, 2 out of 3, and I'm not talking about somebody with a startup. I'm not talking necessarily about somebody who's professional services and makes a living. I am talking about established companies. 65% are owned by boomer age owners. And if you don't think that's going to not impact the economy, you're not reading the paper, you're not talking to people properly. What's happened is, it's kind of like what I call the pig and the python, where a number of years ago, much like Freedom 55, which never really worked for a lot of people, what had happened was the banks and other financial institutions thought that business owners would get to their kind of mid-50s, sell the company, go and play golf, travel, do all those wonderful things. And clearly, they never talked to a business owner-operator, because I don't know any business owner-operator that actually wants to stop doing what they're doing. In fact, they'd love to be able to do it forever. So, that whole myth of all those businesses turning over 5 years ago or 10 years ago never happened. So what's happening now is that you have this huge lump of businesses. Most of these 65% are companies that have not transitioned, and in many, many cases, and I don't have the stats to give you right this second, but I can tell you overwhelmingly, like in the 80% range, they don't even have a succession plan. So they have no idea what they're doing. Their backup position is, well, my kids are going to take over the business, which is another horrendous myth, because it doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen for a number of reasons, mostly because they're busy doing something else and they have no interest in taking over the business. Or you make this wonderful mistake where you bring a child into the business and all of a sudden they just drive it into the ground, which happens more often than one might think. So another statistic, it's in the high 70s or 80s, the failure rate of a business going from one generation to the second generation. Who wants to hear what the failure rate is of a business going from a second generation to a third generation? 97%.
Wow, really? Wow.
So the odds are somewhat against your plan if you think you're going to hand the business down. I have to tell you this one short story. I knew this family, and they had 3 sons, and the parents had built up a business, and it was napkins and paper plates and whatnot. It was a good-sized business. It wasn't, they weren't knocking down Wall Street, but it was a good-sized business. They made a good living. Family was taken care of. Everybody was happy. And it came time to reach retirement. And this business was going to pay for their retirement. Now, they had 3 sons. And one son was not interested in the business, nor was he anywhere remotely qualified to run any kind of a business. Another son was a really successful lawyer, And then the middle son decided that he was the entitled one, and I mean the entitled one. So he essentially demanded the business. He received the business, and within 2 to 3 years, he drove the business into the ground. So the retirement plan, all the retirement money, gone, kaput. If it wasn't for the third son, who was a very successful lawyer, those parents, they would have been in a horrible, horrible position. This is not an unusual story. This happens far more than you think. And the same thing can happen because somebody waits too long, to do anything about the business. And part of this evening is about getting the conversation started. And it's actually one of the questions, and we'll get to that. But from a statistics standpoint, enough said that it's overwhelming how many businesses there are out there and how many owner-operators who are just not in any position to deal with this situation. And in fact, you have a situation with a lot of owners, typically in the under $2 million range, and mostly the ones, it's what is often called a lifestyle business, which means the business is just big enough to, pay for their summer home, pay for the vacations, pay for all the toys. It's big enough that they have employees, but it's not too big that they can't wrap their arms around it and they can't control it. It's a lifestyle business. It typically doesn't go over $2 million for a reason, because they don't want to go over $2 million. And I've had far too many conversations with those owners, and here's their exit strategy. Eric, I can sell my business for X amount of dollars, or I can wait it out for another 3 or 4 years, make the same money that I would have sold the business for. Okay, that's, part of it. But here's the kicker. Then I'm just going to close the doors and get the hell out. Okay, so wait a minute. You have a $2 million business that you've spent 25, 30 years growing. So effectively you have a machine that could be, making money for a long time. You don't care about your 15 employees, like George, who's been with you for 26 years, and the other guy who's been with you for 17 or 18 years. You're just going to close the doors, and you're going to just say, okay, goodbye. What's going to happen to all those people? It isn't every owner that treats this way, but there are enough conversations that I've had with owners on the small side, and in my humble opinion, it's not just the owners that you have to, be considered with. It's not necessarily just the employees, it's the vendors, it's the customers, it's all the other people that will be impacted by this, and it's the economy. So do the math just for a second. One owner decides to put 15 families at risk. 10 owners put 150 families at risk. 100 owners, 1,000 owners, 10,000 owners do this. How many families are at risk? Sure, maybe younger people can go and get a job, but how many jobs is the guy who's 55 years old, how many jobs is he going to get when he's been working for Joe Blow millwork for 27 years? He's just not going to. So part of my going and talking to groups, and I'm sorry to evangelize a little bit, but I really feel strongly about it and passionately that our economy can't handle this, and we need, as business people, we need to have the desire and the energy to go out and do some things about these kinds of situations. Because, I would rather see a whole bunch of companies be taken over by somebody else, employing more people, providing more revenue to vendors, better service for customers, paying the employees more. I'd rather just see the upside of what could happen. I kind of look at it as, it's almost like you have a Maserati in the garage and you drive it to the store for milk. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense when you could be doing so much more. And so one of the other thoughts that I've been promoting within the marketplace, and there's something to think about. There's a lot of people that are out there in startup mode, and they're going and looking for $1 million or $2 or $3 million in startup money to fund this widget that they want to create. Well, what would happen if you went for $3 million and you're involved in this business, right? You went for $3 million in startup money and you said to the investors, oh, I'm going to use it to buy an existing business that has customers and cash flow and vendors and and everything in place and history, and then I'm going to integrate my idea for nothing or very little into this existing business. Are they going to have a better chance of getting investment money? And these are the kinds of things that people need to start thinking about, and not knowing what everyone does here. Clearly it resonates with you, and I'm sure it resonates with a few other folks. Okay, who has the next question?
Companies sometimes grow by acquisition. What can you tell us about the buying side?
Okay. Interestingly enough, we're just going through that process ourselves. We're looking. By the way, was that the next question in a row?
No.
Oh,
Do you have to do the next one?
yeah, because it's the flow of the.
Oh, sorry. My boss thinks
It was a preview. Sorry.
My boss thinks if he sells his business, he will immediately drop dead.
Oh, see, that's a great question.
Or worse yet, he won't know what to do with himself.
Yes. Thank you.
Can you elaborate on that?
Who's heard this from their boss or their client? That, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. And, it's because they haven't stopped to think about it. They haven't looked around. If you go to the Warren BDC website, there's a poster. It's 75 things to do if you, retire or stop working. And you can just download it as an 8.5 by 11 page. But it took me, 20 minutes to figure out 75 different things that one can do, from, doing philanthropic things to traveling, which is the cliche, golf is the cliche. What we're finding in terms of the owners who have stepped down, what is happening an awful lot is they've stepped down, they've taken 6 months or a year or maybe 2 years and done all the fun things, and then they've immediately gone back into business. Now, they're not necessarily looking to, get back into what they were doing. In fact, oftentimes the conversation goes something like this. It's like, I want to do something that's fun. I miss the, the jazz of, being in business. I want to coach. I want to mentor. But it's frustrating coaching or mentoring startups or too young businesses. So I'm thinking about just buying something. And, and money is fourth on my list. I don't really care about that. So they're looking to buy the $2 or $3 million companies, and they might buy $2 or $3 million companies. And so, one of the questions you might have is, okay, well, what's going to happen to all these companies? That's what's starting to happen, is that the folks who have owned larger businesses, in order to feel, continue to feel alive and vibrant and excited, and so that they can't wait to get up in the morning, they're investing in companies and taking all their skills. They're making sure that their company doesn't revolve around them. They're just getting involved on a kind of an outside basis, almost a mentorish basis, but they still have the control in order to say, something needs to be done a certain way in growing those companies. And that's very exciting, because they're just breathing life into companies that, perhaps grew, as we said earlier, to 2 million or 5 million or 8 million or 10 million, and did not go to where it's going. And when we get to the other question about buying, I'll tell you a brief story about something we're involved in right now. So from the standpoint of having a conversation with someone, and that's likely what's going to happen, you're going to say to your boss, to your client, so, Joe, are you thinking about retiring? What are you thinking about, with the future of the company? The kids aren't interested in the business. There's nobody within the management team that's, raised their hand that said that they're interested in taking over the company. What are you going to do? And the answer typically is, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. I like what I'm doing. Sound familiar? I like what I'm doing. I'm enjoying myself. I don't have a big burning desire to go and do something else. It's mostly because they haven't thought about it. It's mostly because they haven't recognized that there are other ways to fulfill your life, that you could maybe do more for the world than just running your business. So you need to get into that conversation, and once you start probing and having that dialogue with an owner, what you're going to find is that, hey, I never thought about that. That's an interesting idea. We have clients that were in a position where they were thinking about, well, we'll just sell it for what it is, and we introduced them to a whole bunch of appropriate vendors that could help them accomplish a lot of things with the business that they couldn't accomplish before, and our skill sets. And these are the companies where somebody was running a $4 or $5 million business, and their plan now is to grow it to be a $10 million business or a $15 million business. But if you would have asked them the question 6 months before, the answer might have been, well, I don't really know what I'm going to do, what I can do with myself. So all of a sudden, you take somebody who's happy and coasting and on cruise control with his company, and all of a sudden, you get him really keen and involved. And it's interesting. I walked into a client's office a few weeks ago, and when I first started to see him, he was basically, he hadn't shaved, and the desk was a mess, and the office was, kind of a mess, and he was grumpy, and that's what his state of mind was, and maybe some of you know some people like that. But once we started working together, and once we started solving the problems that he had, why aren't you going after larger companies? Well, I'd love to go after larger projects, Eric, but I can't afford it. Well, we found the funds that could help him to do that. Well, even if I got the larger projects, well, unfortunately, I can't find the right people. Well, we found, a recruiting firm that could help them, get the right people. He was in a highly specialized part of an engineering industry, and so we found all those right people. But today, you walk in, he's clean shaven, the desk is completely clear, except for one or two little things. He's smiling, he's excited, he's up in the middle of the night, not worrying about the business, but excited and enthusiastic about what's happening with the company. So if you can bring that on to someone and help improve their lives that way, that's a pretty good reason to have this, this kind of conversation with them. Does that make sense? Does it seem like it's a reasonably rewarding thing to do? Okay, in order, who has the next question? But you know what's funny about this? I never see the sheet going anywhere, so I'm sitting here going, okay, who has it? Is it a surprise to me? I think so.
So, Eric, sometimes
Go with the snappy dresser
I
part.
really
Okay?
don't know what my S&P owner, boss, client, friend, spouse is thinking when it comes to transition. Can you help me understand this?
Sure. He's scared to death. He truly is, for a number of the reasons that we've talked about earlier. He doesn't know what he doesn't know. See, now I've seen it. Okay. Thank you. So basically, people are being just attacked with the paper, and they have no choice in that. Okay, good. I can see the group dynamics going on. Interesting. So he doesn't know what he doesn't know. He has talked to a few of his friends, or she has talked to a few of their friends. Some have told them horror stories, some have told them good stories and good experiences. He or she are collecting information slowly. They're maybe going out to the odd seminar, but rarely do they go to an event that is quote unquote transitioning your business, because the last thing in the world they want is anyone seeing them in a public forum. And even if they do go to that event, 3/4 of the people at the event are vendors who are trying to get to that person, and they'll never raise their hand. But so it's difficult. They're reading things. Maybe they're reading my emails or the book, or there's a lot more information online, and people doing videos and things. And so there's a lot of different people, that are providing them with information. But basically, this is a pretty steep learning curve for something that's so important, so it becomes somewhat intimidating. But then at the same time, you have this personal anguish that they're really going through. And I have to tell you that when I meet with a business owner, let's say that they've reached out to me because they've been getting the emails, and basically I get a call or an email that goes something like this: "Hi Eric, I've been getting your emails for 3 or 4 or 5 years now, sometimes more, and I think it's time that we talk." And so, we have a dialogue, and I'll tell you that 80% of the conversation is about emotion. So if you think that this whole concept of succession and transition, selling your business and all that stuff is about numbers or balance sheets, of course it's an important element, and you'll get into that aspect of it when one is doing due diligence. But the initial portion of this whole dialogue is totally emotional. So if you go in on a financial level to talk to your boss or your client or your spouse, you're missing the point. They don't have any need or desire at this point in the process to worry about numbers. Sure, they might say, well, what do you think I could get for my business? And at which point, typically, if you're a financial person, you're CFO or what have you, controller, you might think that the boss is including you in what's going on. He's not. He just asked you a really simple snap question, and either you have the answer or you don't. What he really needs to do is to talk to someone. And when we go in, it's very conversational. It's 80% the owner. Okay, I'm getting nervous as Paul is going by. It's 80% about the owner, about the family, about his personal desires, about his spouse. It's just a lot of conversation, and we let them do kind of all or most of the talking. And eventually you get to a little bit of the business, but really, they talk about their kids, and sometimes you end up becoming a bit of a family therapist. You start out being a personal therapist for the owner, then eventually, you start to become a family therapist. And if anybody knows anything about family business, who works for a family business or has worked or has clients? Because most small and medium-sized businesses basically are family businesses. There's a family business, there's a blood family, and there's the work family. And it's very different, however, there's always two sets of rules. However, you can be closer to your work family than you can to your blood family. So that owner might be talking to their work family and not necessarily talking to their blood family about what it is that they want to do. And naturally, if it's a larger organization, 8 or 10 or 15 or $20 million in annual sales, they're desperate to find someone to help them. Everyone here has the opportunity to do that. And, as Paul keeps saying, you need to add more arrows to your quiver. You need to add things like succession and transition to your portfolio of knowledge and services that you can offer to a business owner, and it makes tremendous sense. And if you want to have a seat at the table, then you need to get into that kind of a conversation. Now, just because you've not had that conversation with the owner before, or you don't perceive yourself as being the one who should have that, they are desperate for someone to talk to. And if you can bring them ideas or bring them information, and I don't know, download the PDF of the book and forward it to them and say, hey, we thought, you might like this. At the end of the day, this whole process called selling your company is very intense. It's extremely time-consuming. It's very important to the owner. And if you're sitting there at the table and you're involved in the decision-making, then a couple things are going to happen. One is you're likely going to learn a huge amount that you can transfer to other organizations. You can find yourself in a position where maybe you're in a much more senior position because the boss decided to pull you out of doing X, which you could do with your eyes closed, and give you some real hardcore responsibility that, again, gives you transferable skills that you can take somewhere else. Or he sells the company, you've raised your profile within that organization, and you've been plucked out of this group of 5, and now you're one over here. And the new owners recognize you as somebody who's formidable and someone that they need to spend some time with, and someone that they need to have as part of their organization. So, there's a lot of reasons. If you're a wealth management person, a financial advisor, I will tell you for certain that somebody sells their $10 million company, or let's say they sell an $8 million company. Typically, an owner has 20% of their wealth, managed by a wealth management person, and 80% of their wealth is wrapped up in the business. So when the time comes that they sell the company, now they have $2 million that you're managing for them, and $8 million that you could potentially manage for them because they've now sold the business, and it's way more money than they've ever had somebody manage for them. Here's likely what will happen. So, thank you, Praveen. I really appreciate the way that you've handled my $2 million. I'm not sure you're big enough to handle the whole $10 million. So not only am I going to take the $8 million and give it to someone else who I think is bigger, I'm going to take the $2 million as well. But if you had a seat at the table, there's less likelihood that that kind of thing is going to happen. So does that make some sense as to why one needs to be aware of what's going on here? It's just huge, massive opportunity for you to grow, within your career, to grow personally, and to help a huge amount of people. It's just a phenomenal, unique time that probably will never happen again. And it's at its peak because essentially owners are running out of time. One of the stats I didn't give you was that a baby boomer is anyone who was born between 1946 and 1964. So the average age of a boomer is around 62, 63 years old. So having worked with this audience for 25 years, when you're 50, 55, 60, you're pretty invincible. You think you can kind of deal with anything. You get to 62, 63, 64, 65. I'm 65. I just turned 65 a little while ago. I have this little hip flexor problem, and I'm working on it and I'm fixing it, but it didn't come until recently. And it's not something that I ever would have thought about. It's not something that I ever would have worried about. Your bosses, your clients, these business owners, they're having the same experiences. It might be a hip flexor, they might have had a knee replacement, they might all of a sudden realize they need to exercise more. They might start to make some changes in their life. They might start to take a little more time off work because they want to have a month or 2 months or 3 months at the cottage. These are all signs that they're thinking about it, they're noodling it, but they're not necessarily overtly going out and telling you that this is what they're doing. And the other thing is that it's very rare that an owner will tell anyone that they're thinking about selling the business. They're not going to tell the bank for sure. That's the last thing they want to do. They're likely, in passing, as I said earlier, to an accountant, what do you think it's worth? Maybe they'll have a chat with a lawyer. We tell owners right off the bat, if your accountant and your lawyer, while they've been loyal to you for decades and you think they're wonderful and they're terrific for your business, if they don't have experience with selling companies, then you're going to need to get someone else. Now, a couple of years ago we would say that, and owners would kind of look at you like, oh, okay. Now, because people are doing more research and thinking about it, and because more people are reading information and learning, when we make that statement, typically an owner will look at us and say, oh yeah, we know, we've already looked into it, we're already looking for someone else. That's what's starting to happen in the marketplace. People are looking to fulfill a very specialized need, and so perhaps what you did for them before was great, but it's not fulfilling the need that they have now. And that's the fundamental difference of what you need to understand about the business that you're in. Does that make sense? Okay. See,